Let's say you're a drink vendor, lemonade vendor, dirty soda, coffee, one of those kind of vendors. And you join the typical lemonade group or coffee group, and you run across an ad in one of those groups for something that is 3D printed. Maybe it helps hold the lemon wedger up higher off the counter so you can stick a cup underneath it. Maybe it holds the cups and lids themselves. Maybe they put your logo on it. So let's talk about whether you should actually be buying that stuff or not. Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I'm the Executive Director of the National Street Food Vendors Association, which is a nonprofit dedicated to education, advocacy, and uplifting all food vendors. Before we get into today's episode talking about those 3D printed items, I want to remind you guys I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, and that's going to be tomorrow. Going to be part of the Food Truck Owners Expo. If you would like to attend, now's the time to buy those tickets. Go to ftoexpo.com, place the order for the tickets today. When you do, put in the code NSFVA for a 15% discount. You can join me in 3 of the classes I'm giving. You can see me on the main expo floor, share your success stories. But you got to buy those tickets today. Again, ftoexpo.com. Now let's talk about 3D printed stuff and whether you should even be considering it or not. I want you to ask yourself one simple question. Because remember, number one, it's homemade. Even though they may have spent money on a 3D printer, it is still homemade. The question is, why would you introduce a possible sanitation or inspection issue just to save a few dollars and get something that looks cool, that no one else is going to see but you? Even a cup or lid holder is not as simple as they look. If you store cups upright, which means the holder is only touching the bottom of the cup, that means the top cup is totally exposed to dust and debris. So if you're a tent vendor, guess what's collecting in those cups in between each of the different orders? All restaurants are taught to store everything inverted. So that way no dust, no debris gets into it. No matter how fast you are and go through those products, there's that potential for contamination inside the part where the food actually goes. So you can't store them with the user side up. That means you have to store them user side down, which means the bottom cup is always touching something that's not easily cleanable, still has the potential for splash, which means every single cup in that stack could have a little dribble of sugar or a little dribble of lemonade or coffee or whatever it is that you sell because somebody got a little bit vigorous in their pouring and made that splash. That's why when you go to a restaurant supply and ask them for cup holders or lid holders, they protect what goes in them. They protect the actual container. We have spring-loaded cup holders on our food truck, which means you invert the cups, put them in the holder, and the thing is completely protected. It only puts up one cup at a time. And it has a little plastic rubbery kind of coating to make sure that stuff doesn't get in between the cups themselves and the cup holder. Do they cost a little bit of money? Yep. Are they durable? Oh yeah. Go into McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's or any of the other fast food restaurants, you will see, if the manager's a good manager, cup holders that are spring-loaded and feed up one cup at a time. 3D stuff looks cool, not food safe. But what about those lemon wedgers that actually hold the lemon wedger up off the counter enough for you to stick a pan underneath it? Well, the question is why? Because you can just sit them on a cutting board and scoop them in. But let's be lazy and jack the thing up. Why do you need it? And then why do you want your logo embossed on it? So now you've created a completely not smooth surface where food is falling. Or the splash when you cut into something. Having the logo feeds your vanity. Doesn't help you be sanitary, doesn't help you clean anything. Now, a lot of areas want NSF approved equipment. So what does NSF mean? It's a standard for cleanability, and that standard means that they've had to put thought into the engineering of that particular piece of equipment. That's why NSF stuff costs more. It's not because, oh, we got that brand on it, so it's got to cost more. It's because they spent more time developing the product so that it meets the cleanability standards as well as being commercial. So when you have somebody at home that copies a 3D file and then turns out one of these holders, it's not NSF approved. The design is going to be the most efficient way for the 3D printer to function. Now, if you've ever seen anything that's 3D printed, it's not smooth. It has little teeny tiny ridges. So what you got to consider, FDA food code, which 49 out of 50 states have adopted in some form, and I'm not aware of any of them that strike this passage. And that passage says, food contact surfaces must be clean, must be smooth, must be non-absorbent, and easily cleanable. A printed part cannot meet any of that standard. Now, that's not me being cautious for the sake of it. PRUSA, Formlabs, and Stratus System tell their own customers in writing, now listen to this, tells their own customers in writing to keep printed parts away from food and drink. The way that a 3D printer works is it layers things. So you have that thread, and then it layers another thread on top of it, and of course they're bonded with heat. And what that does is it creates either visible grooves or microscopic grooves that are going to trap bacteria, and it cannot be cleaned easily. So that already negates the FDA food code. Food safe filament is not the same as food safe finished part. There's a huge difference. Regulations test raw plastic pellets, not what comes out of the heated nozzle. There is a difference. The filament's food safe, not the product once it's produced. Now here's something that you're never going to hear someone that has a 3D printer admit, even if they know it to begin with. The standard brass nozzles that are used in a common home 3D printer can carry trace amounts of lead. And guess what? That trace amount can transfer to the plastic when it's printing at temperature. Filament colorants, what gives them the cool little colors, they have additives that are frequently unverified for food contact. Filament makers themselves say their product is for personal use only and there's no certification behind them. Why in the world would you buy something from some nut on Etsy that's selling you a little cool, colorful cup holder? You're in the food service industry. If you want to use it at home, have at it. But don't give it to somebody that you have no idea if their immune system can handle whatever contaminants are in that product as it transfers to the lemonade or the coffee or whatever it is that you're selling. Anything that your guest's mouth touches, whether it's cups, lids, straws, it needs commercial food-grade equipment. And that ain't coming off a home printer. It certainly isn't coming off Etsy. So the ads that I've seen, super expensive product, $35 for a little thing to hold your wedger up off the counter, which again, you don't need, to set it on a cutting board and wedge away. Then use a scraper and put it into a pan, not that hard, because I know you're not wedging a full lemon to stick into a cup. And if you are, why? The rind itself creates bitterness. When they zest the rind of the lemon, it's for the aromatic, so you can smell the lemon. It's not for flavor, because the flavor is actually bitter. But hey, let's leave it in lemonade, because we don't want to have to throw away those lemon rinds, because it makes for a very heavy trash can by the end of the day. So let's give them to the guests and let them deal with it. We don't care if it makes the drink bitter. When I see someone leave the lemon in there, it's like, nope, I'm not buying that, because I know what it's going to taste like. If you can't taste the bitterness, then you don't understand your own product. So the bottom line, understand what the food code and what the printer makers actually say. Start with the food regulation that safety inspectors from the health department are going to be following. If you want to get real specific, it's FDA Food Code Section 4-101.11. Requires the material for multi-use food contact surfaces be safe, durable, corrosive, resistant, and non-absorbent. They must also be finished to a smooth, easily cleanable surface, and that surface must resist pitting, chipping, crazing, scratching, scoring, distortion, and decomposition. Section 4-202.11 goes even farther. Multi-use food contact surfaces must be smooth, free of breaks, open seams, cracks, chips, and pits. They must also be free of sharp internal edges and crevices where bacteria can collect. Read that list next to a part that's fresh off a FDM printer. The mismatch is obvious. Every layer boundary is a seam. Literally hundreds and thousands of seams. And every one of those seams is a place for dirt, debris, moisture, bacteria. Every single one of them. And you want to put that around your food. One of the biggest names in 3D printing, PRUSA, addresses this directly in its own knowledge base. A print itself can never be food grade. Let me say that again. A print itself can never be food grade. The company says that plainly. And yet you want to spend $35 and put something directly underneath that wedger and drop food into it. FFF printing produces objects with gaps between the layers, and those gaps become a breeding ground for bacteria and fungus, and those things cause illnesses. PRUSA goes on to say it does not recommend using 3D prints as food containers at all. Even its filaments carrying food-safe pigments have not been through the actual certification testing, which means someone gets sick, they come back to you having used a 3D printed product, and they link that 3D printed product as having caused the illness. All of the buck stops with you. You can't blame the printer, you can't blame the dude that sold it on Etsy, you can't blame the company that produces the filament because they're telling you it's not been certified. But hey, you spend $35 because it has your logo on it. Stratasys builds industrial 3D printer systems, and they're used across manufacturing. It frames the underlying regulatory issue clearly. Food grade status applies to the finished part made within a validated, documented workflow, not to the spool of plastic sitting on the shelf. A 3D desktop printer has no validation, no documentation of that end product. It doesn't meet the bar. It doesn't even get into the game. It doesn't matter what the filament label says. It's the process, the assembly process that matters, the end product, which does not have approval. If you've got 3D printed stuff on your truck, stop using it. Certainly don't use it where you're going to be holding cups or lids or straws. Certainly don't use it where you're cutting lemons or tomatoes or slicing something. And it's cool to have your logo. No one sees it. It's colorful. Yay. You want to be food safe. You want to be open next year. You don't want to have to be fighting in court over something dumb. Oh, I used a 3D product that made somebody sick. How defensible is that going to be? Don't try to save a couple of bucks. Anything that can be 3D printed already exists somewhere else as a NSF approved product. It's your business, but it's my guess you might be serving and making sick if you use something like that. Thank you guys so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you're finding everything helpful that we do, please consider subscribing. If you love what we do two things for me. Whatever your platform wants, like, subscribe, follow, whatever it says, please do that so you know the next time that we put up a new episode. And also go to nsfva.org. Join our association today. There's over 40 hours of classes, both master classes and mini classes available to you right now to listen to, as well as you can join our weekly live mini class. You can also join 2 different live group coachings with me every single week. It's $19 a month. You're not going to find a better deal.